Now, this is my first choice when it comes to an SRT anchor, is a Canopy anchor with a screw link and an Alpine butterfly. I like the Alpine butterfly and the screw link because I can put that anywhere in my climbing line. From one end to the other end to the middle, anywhere I can put that. I can plan my climb so that I have just enough SRT line to make my ascent and leave the rest of the tail of my climbing line on the ground so that it's available for rescue or secondary climbing line or whatever. But my SRT line then only needs to be as long as I need it for that particular climb. Now on the running end of my SRT climbing line, I will have the rest of my climbing line flaked out in a bag, available for rescue or whatever. I will also have my DDRT system on the tail of that climbing line. I can either take that up with me, or I can pull it up the tree when I get to my tie-in point. I use the DDRT system for positioning, for an extra lanyard, moving about the tree, or making traverses. The running end is the spliced end of my climbing line where I have my DDRT system set up. The SRT end is the non-spliced end, and I usually have a bitter end knot on the SRT line. Another approach is to use a base anchor through the canopy. If it's difficult for you to isolate your climbing line, or if it's real high, or you're wanting to use multiple anchors to back up for a primary anchor, you can do that. Another advantage of using a canopy anchor, if by some chance you end up with a weak anchor above a very large anchor, we don't like this, but it's possible sometimes because it's difficult to see a small anchor above a larger anchor. If this anchor ever gives way, you will take a small fall, but you have your backups. A disadvantage, of course, is that you've doubled the load on your canopy anchor. Alright, so here, this might be a typical base anchor scenario where you have not isolated your climbing line, you have it set on a major anchor, you have other anchors down here that provide backup if this anchor were to fail. You do have backup anchors. One nice thing about that is if for some reason you did take a fall, you have all of your climbing line through the whole system from the base to wherever you are in your SRT ascent for some fall protection, and it gives you a little bit of stretch because you're using the entire climbing line for your ascent. One disadvantage is that not only have you doubled the load on your SRT anchor, you've also doubled your exposure for your climbing line, because you not only have just your SRT line, but you have the back side of that, which is, if you're cutting, it's possible that you can cut this. If you're hanging from this line, you might hit this with your saw. It's also possible for somebody to mess up a rescue and cut your base anchor, or it's possible for a groundie to cut your base anchor. So you've doubled the exposure and you've doubled the load. One way to mitigate that is once you reach your tie-in point on this base anchor ascent, once you reach this tie-in point, just take and tie in an Alpine butterfly, and again a screw link, because it can be done anywhere in your climbing line, and isolate your anchor into a cinched canopy anchor. Alright, in this case, I still have my base anchor. All I did is put some slack in my line so that I could tie an Alpine butterfly, put the screw link in, and now I'm back on a single SRT ascent line with a canopy anchor. So now I've taken the load and I've gone to a single load on my anchor, and I have mitigated the vulnerability I had from the running end of my climbing line by hitting this with a saw, or having a groundie or somebody else on the ground affect my anchor. Another option, and this provides a rescue ascent line as well as a secondary climbing line. Once you've made your ascent on your base anchor to your tie-in point, clip in, put some slack in your climbing line. I've already tied the bunny ears. This is a figure 8 on a bite or bunny ears. Tie that, wrap it over your tie-in point, and again with your screw link, and capture both working end and running end of your climbing line, again with a screw link. Now you have actually, with the same configuration, you've converted this to 2 climbing lines. You have your SRT ascent line, and you have the secondary, which still goes down to your base anchor, and it's still anchored off on the tree. If you wanted, you could have a groundy release that base anchor and use it. But now you have your SRT line for your ascent working in the tree. You can go and you can do all your redirects wherever you're going to go through the tree. And when you come back to the trunk of the tree, you can ascend the secondary line and retrieve all of your redirects, just like if you were standing on the ground. The disadvantage is you've got to go back up to your tie-in point. But with SRT, I really don't find that being difficult, especially on a rope walker. It's like going up a few flights of stairs. But now you have basically 2 ascent lines. On a tall tree, you have a secondary ascent line for another climber. You have your primary ascent line. And even if you put another climber on this end of your ascent line, and you're on this on your own ascent line, you haven't even increased the load of your anchor, because you can both be on the same anchor and have the same load that you would have on that anchor individually, SRT.